Howdy, howdy. Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 83. You all should be having a fantastic week. It's Christmas week. If you've got little ones, that's a lot of fun. And so it's Christmas week. We are closed for the next 3 days, giving our guys a chance to rest up before the season just goes from zero to full speed in a hurry. So, we're closed the next 3 days. And then Friday, we're going to be loading up for Tulsa and then heading out for Tulsa this weekend. Shootout all next week for a good portion of our staff. And then we got a few staying back to wrap up our Chili Bowl builds and getting everything ready for Chili Bowl. Every year it seems to get busier and busier, and the off season seems to get shorter and shorter. So it feels like just a few weeks ago we were like, gosh, we're about caught up. There's not much left to do. And then it goes wide open after PRI. So super grateful for that. Looking forward to a couple days with my kiddos before heading off for Tulsa for a week or so for the shootout. And then come back, regroup, reload, retool, and Chili Bowl. So two big races to kick off the season, and races that we want to win badly. We've been very fortunate here the last couple years to be pretty dominant at the Tulsa shootout, winning 10 of the last 12 A-main events, but racing things change quickly, and you're only as good as your last race. So we haven't won the Chili Bowl for a number of years. Brian Clausen won that race for us. And I feel pretty good about our midget program. We worked really hard this season, and we certainly have got some guys that have been really fast on the USAC side, and hopefully that can translate into a very good Chili Bowl for us. And then we will be, only home for a couple weeks after Chili Bowl before we head to Florida for First National Quarter Midget race, and then Outlaws are down there, and USAC Sprint Cars. So it's going to be busy. And we hope to see you guys at some of those races. So tonight, we are going to talk steering pumps with Kevin Thomas, who is our steering pump guru here, steering guru in general. So we filmed this earlier today, and Kevin and I are going to talk about steering pumps for 6 or 7 minutes, and then we'll come back, answer all your questions live regarding anything steering, shocks, pit logic, what you want Santa to bring you, whatever. So without further ado, here is that video, and again, it's 6 or 7 minutes long, and we'll come back and answer your questions. We're here with Kevin Thomas to talk about an important part of your off-season maintenance, and that is your steering gear and pump. We're getting a ton of steering gears in, but they're not always adjoined by the steering pump, which is an integral part of the whole system. So Kevin, tell us why it's so important to get that pump checked out along with the gear.
Well, the steering and the pump are a system, and the system needs to work properly, and you really have to have the pump and the steering to make sure that the customer's getting the best product they can get after a rebuild. And so the clearances on a pump are extremely close, as tight as 0.5 of a thousandth in areas. So if you have a steering and you have a lot of wear components in there with steel and everything, that's gone through the pump and has opened up the clearances, and we do all 99% of the time have to do something with the pump to get it up to snuff. We do dyno the pumps if you send the pump in and there's no visible hex damage or bearing damage, we'll dyno the pump, and if the pump's good, then there's no cost whatsoever to the customer. But we like to know, and we know that you want to know, that you've got a good product when we're done.
Yeah, and so that's an important point, that we do dyno the pumps for free, just like we dyno our customer shocks for free. That's a service that we want to provide to make sure our customers have the absolute best product. So if you're a customer of ours, we will dyno the pump for free. And sometimes it's as simple as maybe just putting a new spring in it, and sometimes
Absolutely.
It requires a whole rebuild. So
Yeah.
If it is a rebuild, let the customers know kind of what's involved in that, and like what do you do as far as a pump rebuild. It seems pretty simple, right? When you take it apart, there's some gears in there, but explain a little bit about the importance of what you do.
Well, when we do take the pump apart, the first thing we do is clean everything thoroughly, and then you can assess what the wear is on all the components. But on a typical rebuild, what you replace is the bearing, the seals, and the O-rings in the pump, and then you go back and you get all the clearances correct on your two gerotor gears with the housing, And then when you assemble it, you make sure that you know, there's no interference and no tight spots or anything like that. And when we dyno them, we bring them up to operating temperature to make sure that it's going to operate properly under the conditions that it's going to race in. And you also get a dyno sheet when we're done with the pump that shows what the line pressure and the gallons per minute flow are.
Yeah, so that's some of the stuff we go through on the pump side. In future weeks, we'll go through in a little more detail with Steve. He's camera shy, but we'll try to get him to talk about what he's. Now, a couple things that have come in, you've pointed out to me, like, hey, we need to tell the customers that this isn't the best for the system is 90-degree fittings and such. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, how you can plumb your race car to get the optimum performance out of your steering gear?
Right, and I don't have one right here I could use for an example, but the fitting that a lot of people like to use, especially in midgets because it's smaller and more compact, is what I call a dead 90, and that's a fitting that is not a full flow 90, but a dead 90. And the way they manufacture that fitting is they drill from one side to a point and drill from the other side, and those don't flow fluid very well. And what they also do is they generate heat. And they also, if you have a dead 90 coming out of the pressure side of your pump, and I dyno that pump, it typically reduces the line pressure by 10%. So heat is detrimental to the overall system and the lack of flow. And so what I like to see is a full flow 90 on the end of the line and a straight coming out of your pump and a straight coming out of the pressure side of your housing on the steering gear itself.
So those are just a couple tips to optimize the system that you have by plumbing the race car when you got stuff apart and getting ready to go through it for the off season. The importance of having a pump come in with the steering gear so we can dyno the whole system and make sure that even if we rebuild your gear how it should, that the pump is going to match the performance and work. So when you start the season next year, you're good to go. Explain if a guy end of the year and he thought his steering was okay, and he starts the season, some of the symptoms he might see if it was slowly losing throughout the year. Because if you race every week and you're losing a couple percent each week, it's probably hard to notice it, but at the end of the season you might have lost 30-40% performance out of your gear. So why would you make sure you get it checked over the off season, and what are some of the symptoms they would see if they started the season with some older equipment?
Well, in the steering gear itself, on the different sections of your spool valve, what you have that seals up against the housing is a neoprene seal. But the one thing that gives that neoprene seal a good seal against the bore in the case on the steering gear is a rubber O-ring underneath it. And the rubber O-ring is just like a tire. Every time that thing fires up and gets up to temperature, it goes through a heat cycle. And after a certain amount of time, what happens is the O-ring conforms to the pressures that are exerted on it, and you end up losing seal or pressure against the housing to make it seal. So when the fluid is coming in off of your pump into that section, it can blow past the ring, just like the rings in a cylinder wall on an engine. And just like in an engine, when those seals become less and less effective, you end up losing your power assist because it's blowing into the return sections of the spool valve. So, and the other thing is as a guy races, and I used to be guilty of this myself, as a guy races on during the season, you become stronger and stronger, and at the end of the year, the steering might not be near as effective, but you're more effective because your arms are in shape and everything's going well. And then after you've sat for 3 months and you get back in the car and you go, well, it was working good at the end of the year, I'll just start off the year with it. And they get in it and their arms have kind of petered out over the winter. They get back in it and they go, whoa, this thing isn't working right. So we get a lot of that. That's why usually in May we get a little rush of guys who are going to try to get by with it for the winter. But typically though, really, you know, what we've found is about 30 races is a good number to go by on your steerings and the effectiveness of it. The pump sometimes around 20, the little relief spring can get a little weak, and that's why we do offer the service of dynoing them for nothing, because maybe the clearances are fine and everything and it just takes a little relief spring. And even then, you don't really have a labor charge or anything, it's just a small relief spring and you're good to go.
All right, so that's going to cover our steering pump section. We're going to be off the next couple weeks as we're in Tulsa. We plan to do some lives there, but not a Monday morning quarterback. When we get back, we're going to prod Steve into talking about steering gears and what's involved with rebuilding those. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will answer your questions live now.
Merry Christmas.
All right. So we had a lot of good stuff to talk about there with steering pumps. Worked on race cars my whole life, was fairly oblivious to how important that little pump is until we started looking at this business to bring in-house earlier this summer. So as you can see, Kevin is extremely experienced. He's been building steering gears a lot longer than I've been building shocks, and is a wealth of knowledge, so we certainly appreciate having him around. Now we will answer any questions you guys have regarding that or anything racing related. Todd, it was good to see you as well. Look forward to seeing you in Vegas, look forward to seeing you in Tulsa. We will be arriving in Tulsa Sunday night to park on Monday, and then a full week of racing action at the Expo Center. So certainly looking forward to that. Anybody that has any questions, fire away. This is going to be our last one here for a few weeks, as we got Tulsa and then for the shootout and the Chili Bowl. I do want to try to do some lives, maybe even a live from the trailer. So we're taking a little bit smaller staff to the shootout this year than we have the last couple, just because we have so much work to do here at the shop. So myself, Jake, and Jordan are going to go. And then the rest of our staff is staying back here to get Chili Bowl stuff caught up. So Steve and Kevin are full speed in the steering department for Chili Bowl, and we're certainly busy in the shock department getting everybody's stuff freshened up for that. So Josh Shipley, how often should your power steering fluid be changed? That's a great question. And Kevin and I were talking about that a little earlier. It kind of depends on the environment that you're racing in. But if you're racing in real dusty environments and that oil's getting dirty, probably every 6 races or so. If you're racing pavement and longer distance races and that box is getting hot, might need to do it a little sooner than that. But typically 6 to 8 races for most of our dirt guys are going to get it where it needs to be and keep the oil clean running through there. As Kevin mentioned, the tolerances in those pumps are so crucial that any little bit of debris that gets run through there can tear up a pump housing and make it lose pressure pretty easily. So, Rick, you're going to get me in trouble. What are my thoughts on the new USAC rule outlawing bump rubbers for quarter midgets? I have a couple strong feelings about it. One, the fact that they told us at Darlington that they would be legal, and as a manufacturer, you kind of can get yourself in a bad spot where we actually have a ton of inventory on the shelf that's now not usable, and they told us that the rules weren't gonna change. I point blank asked them because rumors were going around that they were gonna get outlawed. And they said, nope, they're not. So that's unfortunate. The other thing is I really feel like the bump rubbers helped people tune without having to have a bunch of shocks and really kind of minimize some of your spring inventory needs with the bump rubber. At the end of the day, we allow $2,500 carbon fiber bodies and $1,500 titanium axles, but we're outlawing a $30 to $100 bump rubber kit, depending on whose brand you use. So, seemed kind of silly to me, but it's the new rule, and we'll deal with it and move on. So, Jerry Burton, Kevin Thomas for president. Yeah, for sure. A lot of these younger guys don't know that Kevin is quite an accomplished sprint car driver, 4-time Indiana Sprint Week champ, and I think he was the all-time Sprint Week feature win leader for a long time till I think maybe Stambro and Darlin surpassed him. So, yep, he's a crack up to have in the shop, and we certainly like having him around. So, RJ, if your steering gear gets as hot as your shocks do, no, 25, 30 races, so really similar to shocks as far as how often you ought to freshen them. So, Dave, thanks for tuning in. Our buddy Dave from Sharp Advantage, he's going to Tulsa this year, so it'll be his first shootout. So we'll see. We'll see how he's feeling throughout the week. We'll have to keep him pumped with airborne and throat lozenges. We usually have our trailer stocked like a pharmacy. So, Rick, yeah, kind of more shocks are going to be needed to get the most out of your setup now that we can't do anything with bump rubbers. So, unfortunate. There's been a lot of grumblings. A lot of people aren't happy. I don't know if they'll reverse it. 2 years ago, we went through a similar thing where USAC got rid of cockpit adjusters on the shocks for the Sprint Car Series, and then they allowed them back the next year. So I'm certainly not going to throw all these bump rubbers I have away in the trash because I have seen the rules go back the other way. So, Chris, we really recommend that KSE Elixir fluid. That's what we use in everything we dyno here. That fluid works really, really well. Especially well with aeration and minimizing cavitation. So we recommend the KSE Elixir fluid. We have it on our website, or you can get it here from our shop. So yeah, that's funny. RJ has a left rear shock that's his favorite shock, and it was black when we sold it to him probably 5 years ago, and now it's gold because the anodize has just been cooked off of it. So that's where that joke's coming from. So, all right. If nobody else has any questions, we will tune off. We hope you guys all have a great Christmas with your family, and we look forward to seeing you guys all at a race here very shortly. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.